Imagine waking up and discovering that someone hasn't purchased you. They've purchased your next 480 days. Not your house, not your crops, 480 individual days of your labor, written on a broken piece of pottery and transferred to another family. This really happened in ancient Egypt, and it reveals something far stranger than the familiar image of slaves dragging stones toward a pyramid. First, remove the pyramid from your imagination. A typical enslaved person in ancient Egypt was probably not dragging a giant stone while someone cracked a whip behind them. Egypt's monuments were largely constructed by organized labor forces, including conscripted and paid workers. Before the Greek-controlled Ptolemaic period, the clearest evidence points mostly to small-scale slavery inside households, estates, temples, and workshops. So, if we want to reconstruct an ordinary day, we should begin inside a house. Meet Tia. Tia is not one specific historical person. She is a composite based on surviving records of female domestic workers in New Kingdom Egypt, particularly around Deir el-Medina in approximately 1200 BCE. She may have been born into servitude, captured abroad, transferred by the state, or purchased from another household. And even the Egyptians might not have described her status consistently. Egyptian records use a word pronounced something like hem, but it can mean slave, servant, worker, or dependent. The same word could even describe a priest, a prisoner of war, a royal subject, or a trusted member of someone's household. That leaves historians with a difficult question. When a document records the sale of a person, was the person being sold, or only the legal right to use their labor? For Tia, that scholarly debate changes nothing. She cannot decide where she works today. Tia probably wakes before the household. There may be no separate slave barracks. Middle Kingdom letters give us rare evidence of an enslaved woman living inside her owner's home, until the owner ordered her out following a dispute. Tia sleeps close to the family she serves. She hears their arguments, comforts their children, and knows where everything valuable is stored. She is physically part of the household, but she can be removed from it at any moment. Tia's first major job is probably not building, it is grinding. She kneels over two stones and pushes grain back and forth until it becomes flour. The grain is emmer wheat or barley, and the flour will become the household's bread and beer. The motion is repetitive. Her knees press against the floor. Fine dust covers her hands and enters the air around her face. This is where the phrase daily grind becomes painfully literal. Records from Deir el-Medina place enslaved or servile women near the bottom of grain distribution lists. They received smaller grain allocations than ordinary workmen. Their names, or sometimes simply their category, appeared after the more valued workers had been counted. Tia spends her morning turning other people's grain into food while receiving less grain for herself. The hierarchy of the village can be read in the order of a ration list. Grinding is only the beginning. A domestic worker might brew beer, prepare dough, sweep floors, carry supplies, spin linen, wash containers, care for children, or help tend small animals. None of these jobs sounds enormous by itself, but together they consume nearly every usable hour. The strange truth is that elite Egyptian life depended on an almost invisible chain of repetitive household labor. Now we reach the strangest part of Tia's day. At Deir el-Medina, households could possess claims to specific days of labor from female domestic workers. Those days could be bought, sold, traded, or inherited. One surviving record concerns the sale of 480 days of service. Another describes labor days passing from a father to his son. Tia's year could effectively be divided into pieces. Monday belonging to one household, another period promised to someone else, and hundreds of future days already transferred on paper. Today, Tia may be sent somewhere unfamiliar. New Kingdom documents mention enslaved women being hired or leased for periods between 2 and 17 days. She could enter another family's home, sleep in an unfamiliar room, follow different rules, and perform work chosen by someone she barely knows. When the rental ends, the payment probably goes to the person controlling her labor, not to her. Here's the part most people don't expect. Evidence suggests that a hired enslaved woman could pursue legal action if she was abused during the rental period. That did not make her equal. Her access to justice depended heavily on influential people listening to her, and the person controlling her still held overwhelming power. But her legal identity had not disappeared completely. Ancient Egyptian slavery could treat someone as property in one situation, and as a person capable of making a complaint in another. Tia probably receives no conventional wage. Instead, the household supplies food, shelter, clothing, and protection. In later Egyptian contracts, enslaved people could negotiate grain rations, and an owner might even pay a female slave's marriage dowry. dowry. This should not be mistaken for kindness. The same person providing tomorrow's meal controls where she lives, where she works, and whether her family remains together. Protection was valuable precisely because life without it could be dangerous. Tia might not have been born in Egypt. One New Kingdom legal dispute concerns a Syrian girl who was sold and given a new Egyptian name. A Middle Kingdom papyrus records 95 household servants, 45 of whom had names or origins connected with Western Asia. Imagine hearing your childhood name only inside your own head, while everyone around you calls you something else. These documents do not prove that the servants were Israelites, but they do show foreign people being absorbed into Egyptian households, sometimes with their identities rewritten. If Tia has a child, motherhood may not change her status. It may reproduce it. Children appear beside enslaved mothers in Egyptian lists, and New Kingdom evidence indicates that enslaved status could pass to the next generation. One surviving letter discusses a young enslaved girl being transferred even though she was considered too young to work. Her mother tried to intervene by contacting the man who had previously controlled her. Even childhood could be evaluated by its future labor value. Centuries after Tia, in Ptolemaic Egypt, another disturbing arrangement appears. Enslaved women with specialized skills could be rented as wet nurses. Some contracts suggest that an enslaved mother might feed someone else's baby, while another woman was hired to nurse her own enslaved child. Ownership did not merely control where a woman worked. It could reorganize the most intimate relationship in her life. In still later Egyptian records, enslaved people are described as being marked. For years, historians often interpreted this as tattooing. More recent research argues that some marks may actually have been made with small heated branding irons. This was not necessarily done to every enslaved person, and the strongest evidence belongs to later periods. But for some people, ownership may have been recorded not only on papyrus, but permanently on the body. Escape was possible, but it was dangerous. One New Kingdom letter records 2 palace slaves fleeing into the desert. A troop commander was ordered to pursue them at high speed. The desert offered places to disappear, but also brutal heat, little water, and few safe communities. Tia may not need visible chains. Geography, hunger, family ties, and the threat of recapture can confine a person just as effectively. Freedom could arrive, but sometimes with extraordinary conditions. An enslaved foreigner named Sabastet had been captured during an Egyptian military campaign. According to an inscription, he agreed to marry his owner's blind niece in exchange for the right to leave the house. He gained a form of freedom. The owner secured a husband for his relative. Even liberation could be structured around what the owning household needed. As darkness returns, Tia lies down beneath the same roof where her day began. She has ground grain, prepared food, cared for another family, and possibly worked in a house belonging to someone who owned only a portion of her time. There was no single experience of slavery across ancient Egypt's 3,000-year history, but the surviving evidence reveals something more complicated and more human than endless rows of pyramid workers. A person's time could be sold, her name could be replaced, her children could inherit her status, and yet she might still complain in court, negotiate food, form a family, or search for a narrow route to freedom. Which detail surprised you most? The 480 days of labor, the temporary rentals, or the strange bargains people made for freedom? Tell me below and subscribe if you want more forgotten details from ordinary life in the ancient world.